We are in a new era of threat. The words of the UK government after it announced its major spending review into the country's defence capabilities. With these warnings over an increasingly uncertain global picture, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been at pains to emphasise his commitment to keeping the country safe. And with that political commitment comes a huge financial one of billions of pounds. Speaking yesterday, when the review's findings were announced, the Prime Minister reaffirmed his peace through strength position.
We are moving to war-fighting readiness as the central purpose of our armed forces. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready, to deliver peace through strength.
We need to see it by the end of this Parliament. Otherwise, many of the plans which they've put, even in this strategic defence review, just will not happen. We need to give certainty to the defence industry as well.
Unless it's fully funded, then frankly it will not be the success that the government wants it to be. It's a bit like in 1937 saying to Hitler, hold on, don't attack us until 1946 because we're not ready.
So what will pledged increases in spending look like, and are they achievable? We got the thoughts of Professor Peter Jackson, Chair of Global Security at Glasgow University. Peter, this defence review was given a big launch yesterday, but the general reaction has been this isn't going to happen. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it will happen under the government's original projected spending plans, for certainly. I mean, I don't think that there's any way that this review would be realized with 2.5% rising to 3% of GDP spending. I think that it will require more, but in the nature of these things, there are projections way into the future, and a lot can change, threats can change, the threat environment can change. So I think that we need to think of this review in a way as provisional.
And has it been driven by the US or by NATO?
Well, I think by both, really. I think from my own perspective, trying to please Donald Trump by upping defense spending is a fool's errand because he's just going to keep demanding more and more and more. But it should be done, in my opinion, because it's the right thing to do for Europe. And there is, I think, an increasingly uncertain and dangerous kind of strategic environment that Europe as a whole and Great Britain needs to confront. And it's right to take defense spending, defense policy, capabilities more seriously.
But is that threat not now? And we're talking maybe another 10 years hence.
There are threats now, what we would probably call asymmetric threats to things like national resilience from cyber attacks. Great Britain, for example, is very dependent on one pipeline from Norway for a lot of its energy. We also use data that comes in through, undersea cables. These things need to be secured now, along with things like the cloud and general kind of critical infrastructure in the United Kingdom. That's an immediate problem. The longer-term threat, for example, from an aggressive and revisionist Russia is looking into the future. Most analysts think between 6 to 8 years should the war end in the foreseeable future with Ukraine before Russia could rearm and retool and adopt a kind of an aggressive foreign policy towards Europe again. So there is that breathing space, but actually, as you know, the years can pass quickly, John.
The Prime Minister spoke about being war ready. Does that mean that we're not now?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt that we're not war ready now. From what I understand, the UK's reserve of medium and long range missiles, for example, has been massively depleted by what's been given to Ukraine, and that in itself is a good reason, for example, to invest in the new plants that are envisaged in this strategic defense review. But there's also the question of how to protect those undersea assets, and the investment in submarines is probably part of that as well. There is also talk of buying F-35 aircraft capable of delivering nuclear warheads, tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield. these kinds of things will take time. There's always a time lag between investment and production, and then when weapons roll off the assembly lines. And in the case of some of these really complicated and expensive weapons, it takes a long time.
What about the idea of expanding the army, wanting to make the army bigger and the reserve in particular bigger? Now, are we not in a situation at the moment where it's hard enough for the army to recruit, particularly in areas in Scotland that used to be well-known recruiting areas?
That's a really good point. It's something that we're not talking about as much as we probably should. I think that the increase to the size of the standing army is really modest. It's about going from 73,000 to 76,000 in an indeterminate future. But what is planned is to build up a strategic reserve of troops. And that means interesting projects like, for example, inducing students to spend a gap year in the armed forces or in the trained reserves, and maybe I hope that they would be given something in return, university or college tuition, something like that. And that would also, I suppose, the logic it would be to inculcate them into some of the kind of cultural reflexes of the military, and make them a little more open to the idea of service. And I think this is another medium to long-term project, but that is the only way I can see of them building up a strategic reserve of troops, manpower.
Just finally, fairly briefly, this is going to be a political choice. We've heard some people say, well, taxes will inevitably have to go up, or there'll need to be cuts to things like welfare. Is that going to be palatable to the British people?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think the British public is ready for a serious defence policy and paying for it. I imagine it would be a combination of some spending cuts, some tax increases, and maybe some borrowing, like innovative borrowing, like war bonds or something like that. I think it would be all three things, and we'll just see how far that goes, John.
Peter, thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.